Hello and welcome to BNTV. My name's Matt Christie and I'm joined by editor Tris Dixon, and today we're going to go with, we put out a note yesterday on Twitter and on our social media for readers to send in their questions, and we've got quite a few. We're going to go through them now, and we'll start off with one from Aaron Shaw, and he's talking about the Adrian Broner calling out Ricky Burns. He said he's going to beat his arse. It's a massive fight in the States or the UK. Tris, who wins and how?
Tough, really tough fight for both fighters. I don't think Broner's fought anyone near Ricky's level, and I think Broner's a very different kettle of fish to anyone that Ricky's fought. As things stand, I think a lot of it would depend on the location of the event. I think if Frank Warren could get the fight over to Scotland, take Broner out of his comfort zone, I'd give Ricky a good shot, but I also think that Broner's speed and reflexes, Ricky hasn't fought anyone with that kind of style, and certainly to that kind of level, so I'd give the edge to Broner. And I think Broner, although he hasn't fought at lightweight yet, I think he is going to be big at the weight. I think he's a guy who could be going up to as high as welterweight. So I would give the edge to Broner, but I mean, it's a very, very tough fight to call. A very, very good fight. In fact, I've just got off the phone with Frank Warren, who said that they were offered the fight for November the 17th. But that only gives Ricky a 6 or 7 week lead up, so they're not going to have time to do it. But they're looking for a unification fight at some point next year, and I think, you know, it's a cracking fight. It's a big fight for Ricky. It would be the biggest of his career, and you know, he would have a very good chance of winning. So Matt, let's turn the tables. I've got a question here for you from Kev Bullis, who says, "What next for Ricky Burns? And where now for Kevin Mitchell?" So obviously the Broner fight is on the back burner, so what next for Burns, and then where now for Kevin?
Burns, I mean, I know you say the Broner fight is on the back burner, but in an ideal world I would put Burns in with Broner now. Simple reason, I think Burns is at his peak. I think the levels that he's improved over the last few years is astonishing. And I was thinking, it's funny, I was thinking when he beat Martinez and he got knocked down quite heavily in that first round. If he hadn't have made it out of that first round, I wonder where he'd be now. But the fact he did, and he had that dogged determination to get out of that. And I don't think, I mean, I've made the mistake so many times, even in the Mitchell fight, of picking against him. I wouldn't pick against Burns again. His determination to succeed is frightening. As for Kevin Mitchell, I think there's been talk of Scott Harrison v Ricky Burns, which at this stage I think in Harrison's comeback is, I think it'd be a mismatch. I think it'd be much like when Harrison, did he fight Hodgkinson, or was it McMillan or somebody?
Oh, McCulloch.
Yeah, so yeah, and it was. I think it'd be a similar scenario to that in terms of Burns' superiority over. But I think Harrison against Mitchell would sell tickets, and I think that'd be a good test for both, and it would see if the winner was able to compete on the fringes of the world scene.
Sure. Big lightweight prize fighter coming up as well, isn't there? So
yeah.
Maybe you could fight one of the guys who does well in the prize fight.
Well, there's so many guys now, aren't there, at lightweight? The likes of Crawlers, Matthews is still hanging around.
He's coming off a sensational win over Crawler, isn't he? So
yeah. Well, he lost to Gavin Rees, didn't he? And Gethin as well, Martin Gethin. He really impressed. He really impressed at the weekend. Okay, next one. Should we ask this one again?
Well, Owen Gallagher says, where does Kevin Mitchell go with his career now? And I mean, I think the thing is with Kevin is if he wants to take it seriously, then he needs to just stay in shape and be ready for a call at short notice, any notice, and he needs to start living the life of a pro. I mean, he's 27, so it's not like he can't come again. But I think he needs to live the life properly and dedicate himself to boxing, and if not, he needs to decide what he wants to do with his life.
Yeah.
So, Matt, from Adam Stoll, do you think Scott Harrison can compete back at world level?
I would be surprised I would be astonished if he was to win a world title again. He's looked decent in his fights that he's come back. I don't think he's looked sensational. I think until he faces a decent calibre opponent, even maybe, I don't know, a fringe contender or something like that, we're not going to know. But it's very rare for a fighter to go through what Scott's been through, have the layoff that he's been through, I mean, bear in mind he was world champion almost 10 years ago now.
At featherweight as well.
Yeah, and that's a long time. That's a long time in boxing, and it would be a wondrous achievement if he did. Okay, Andy, we'll go for a question now from Andy Clutton. Would anyone be asking for a Chavez Jr. Martinez rematch if it hadn't been for the last round? And what chance Junior getting banned by his godfather at the WBC?
I think he's asked those questions knowing the answers to both. I don't think there'd be any interest in the rematch had it not been for that last round. That last round is, you know, it's I don't know, $20 million round really. That's what it could be worth. You know, if you think that the rematch, I understand, is in play, possibly for Las Vegas. I think Martinez turned his nose up at Texas, and you can understand why. But yeah, I mean, without that last round, there's no interest in the rematch. But with that last round, you ask the question, you know, what happened if there was another round, or what happened if Chavez had hurt Martinez like that in round 5? You know, would Martinez be able to escape? So that makes it a very plausible rematch. And to be quite frank, I mean, I was watching at home and leaping off my sofa, I think for the first time since Pacquiao knocked Marquez down in their second fight, the first time I've involuntarily leapt off my sofa. I'm not even sure why I did it. I don't know if I wanted Martinez to hold on or Chavez to turn it around, or just because I was completely absorbed by the moment of pure sport and, you know, brilliance. It was just incredible. So, you know, so I wouldn't mind seeing that fight again based on the questions that were posed in the 12th round. What chance Junior getting banned by his godfather, Jose Sulaiman at the BC? None. Basically. So, Matt, we've got a question from the Scottish Fight Score Collector website here, saying, what domestic fighter should Scott Harrison fight next? And he's thinking Crawler or Matthews.
They're both logical steps, aren't they? They're both. I think we've touched on the lightweight domestic scene. I think any of the guys that are in and around the top 5 or 6 in the country would be a logical step for Scott Harrison before he thinks about moving on to world level. And each contest would be an intriguing contest. Each contest would sell tickets if he was in the right venue. So I think that is the best next step for him. For me, I'd like to see him fight Crawler. I think that'd be a really good fight. I like Crawler as a fighter. It'd be interesting to see where he is. Obviously, it depends on his performance in Prize Fighter, but Prize Fighter isn't necessarily the be-all and end-all. But I'd like to see how Crawler would cope with Harrison and vice versa.
Another lightweight we haven't mentioned in the mix is John Murray, of course.
Of course, yes, yeah.
Cracking fights out there.
Okay, this is a good one for you. James Dadson asks, how would I go about trying to work for your magazine? He's a massive boxing fan and he wants a changing career.
Well, we take internships. We take people on work experience and interns, so we give people a chance to get a foot in the door. I get sent all kinds of blogs and stories that people write all the time, pretty much every day. And basically the advice that I give is to write something a little bit different and a little bit, you know, come at something from a slightly different perspective or involve some different names. I can't remember how many off the top of my head, but it's probably in the region of between 30 and 50. I got sent 30 or 50 blogs on the Ricky Burns fight. And, you know, for a start, I don't have time, unfortunately, to read them all. I read what I can, but I can't read them all. And secondly, there's a lot of repetition in there. So I mean, I don't really want to read 30 blogs on a fight that I was at ringside for. You know, I'd rather read about something different and come at things from a slightly different angle. So, you know, I think it's down to people being inventive and creative with their ideas and story ideas, and going out and putting in some work and making some connections where they can get some quotes from people to make stories interesting. With regards to professional training, it always helps if you've got a background in journalism. You know, if you know, it's not something, you know, if I wanted to go and be a doctor, it's not something where I can say, oh, I need to go and change my career, I want to go and be a doctor. You know, I'd write to a surgery and say, let me come and work for you. You know, you do need skills to obviously do this, to do this job in terms of writing, spelling, grammar. You need to have you know, some flair and panache and something unique about your style, ideally. So, I mean, hopefully that gives James a few pointers, but it's not an easy profession to break into. You know, we know that we're very lucky to be here, and all the best with trying to get a foot in the door. But if you'd like to send over your CV, feel free to. Okay, $1,000 question here from Andrew Peary. Any word on what channel Ricky Hatton will be fighting on?
No. No, I think the initial thought was that it was, or we thought it may be Channel 5, but I think you know more on this. You're better equipped to answer this question than me.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think everything's going to be announced, I believe, on Friday. So it's going to sit tight. No one knows anything until Friday. I wouldn't rule anyone in or anyone out because there was so much interest in the tickets. The people that I'd heard were out of the running are suddenly back in the running. It wouldn't surprise me if things are going to be changing until Thursday night, and they pick someone and stick with it on Thursday night. It wouldn't surprise me if things are changing that rapidly. So I don't know. I mean, I've been told it's not Box Nation. I've been told it's not Channel 5. I've been told it's not Sky. You're running out of options. So, but it will obviously be somewhere. So. I've been told everywhere it's not, and I've been told anywhere where it is. I mean, the logical step for me, and perhaps what I'd like to see, would be for Ricky and his stable to go to Channel 5.
Yeah.
And from a business standpoint, what would make sense would be to put Ricky's fight on prime time, because they have the hookup, Channel 5 and prime time. They have a relationship, so Ricky could do some build-up TV on Channel 5 and then maybe put the undercard on Channel 5 and then move across to the main event on prime time. I think that could work logistically. But I mean, we'll find out for sure on Friday. Yeah,
they've had some good viewing figures as well, haven't they, on Channel 5, even for the lesser fights that have been shown.
Yeah, well, Kid Galahad's had 1 million.
Yeah, exactly.
Tyson Fury 3 million.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean, Hatton could do, anywhere from 5 to 10 million, I'd say.
Yeah.
But that would be Channel 5. If it's prime time, then it's obviously going to restrict it a little bit more by putting the paywalls up. But we have to see.
Okay, Matthew Bromfield on a similar issue. What's your take on Hatton Katsidis? He's heavily rumoured to be the comeback opponent for Ricky.
Interesting, really. I don't think Katsidis has got much left. So in that respect, it could be very, very good. And Katsidis, big name, makes for entertaining fights. On the flip side, is we don't know what Ricky's got left. So it could be a really horrific, gruelling fight. I mean, there was talk of them fighting in their primes or close to their primes, a couple of 3-4 years ago, and everyone was sort of salivating at the prospect of those clashing styles. And now, we're both, I think it's fair to say, have eroded somewhat since then through different things. Katsidis a lot of hard fights, Ricky hard life and inactivity. I think it could be a really brutal assignment back, I just don't know. If Katsidis, a lot depends on, and it's a thing that we've said all the way through, we won't know what Ricky's got left until the night. Yeah. And I think it's fair to say that Katsidis isn't the fighter he was, and if it's at welterweight, I don't believe he's ever fought at welterweight, maybe in the last fight, but he's got no real form at welterweight. So, and Ricky's obviously had a title at welterweight when he beat Louis Collazo, so You'd fancy Ricky as the bigger man to do it, but he could get drawn into a hell of a battle. Yeah. And I think it could make for an epic fight. But God, it's grueling just to think about it.
Brace yourself.
So, but yeah, interesting choice of opponent, that's for sure. Okay, a question from Micah A. Solis. What's your take on catchweight title fights?
I mean, me personally, I'm not a fan. I think there's enough divisions now in boxing that there shouldn't be catchweight title fights. They're generally tailored so that somebody won't have an advantage, won't be too big. But I suppose if both parties are in agreement, then it's up to the fighters to come to that decision. But me personally, I'd love a day where we go back to 8 divisions and 8 world champions. I think catchweight title fights just makes a mockery of the traditional divisions even further.
Okay, I have to agree.
Right, Brett Davis wonders, Kessler versus Froch, who wins this time?
I have to go with Froch. I think he's got, although he's been in some staggering fights, I think he's got less mileage than Kessler. and I think if it was to happen again, it happens in the UK. Obviously, you know, Froch pushed Kessler very, very close last time. I was there at that fight in Herning. It was quite possibly the last really violent fight I think I've attended. I mean, that was an astonishing fight, being ringside for you. And I mean, I was on the ring apron, and you could hear the punches, you know, explode. You know, it was just ferocious, really ferocious fight. And but I think Froch wins this time. I mean, going into that fight, he had the issues with the ash cloud, the transportation. You know, the fight was on, the fight was off. He didn't know where he stood at that week. Rachel, his other half, was pregnant as well. And he had a lot on his plate. But take all that stuff aside, I think Kessler's regressed a bit. Carl, I think, hit the top of his game against Boutte. Plus the fight over here, I think Froch wins. Yeah. But I think it's another good fight. I don't think I don't think it's a blowout.
Yeah, no, I'd pick Froch as well. I'd pick Froch. Can I ask you this one, because I don't know the answer to this one. Do you know the answer to this one?
I don't. But you go on.
Okay, right. Gary Roper asks, how much heavier than Kevin Mitchell was Ricky Burns come fight time?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's an American thing that HBO do. They weigh the fighters on the night of the fight to see. I think it looked like Burns was bigger on the night, but sometimes that can look deceptive. But I mean, there's talk of Burns in the future moving up to light welter, so indicates that you know that he put on some size. I did hear off the record that that there was a sort of that I think maybe Mitchell had put on 7 pounds and Burns 9 pounds after the weigh-in, but that was unconfirmed and unofficial. So I think it's fair to say that Burns was bigger, but maybe not as much as it looked, not by as much as it looked. Okay, Matt, so you dodged that one, so I'll ask you this one from Ben Roachford. Will David Haye versus Vitali happen?
I would. It's a difficult one. Vitali isn't making noises about retirement that I suspected he would. I think we've got to wait until after the elections before there's any kind of concrete plans. But if there's one thing David Haye is good at, and that's promoting himself, he proved that he got under Vladimir's skin. He secured that fight, and I think the Klitschko's still feel there's a bit of unfinished business there. I think if it was just left to Vitali, I think he would accept that fight in a flash. Whether he'll be advised to do so is a different matter. But head on the chopping block, I would say yes, it will happen.
Okay.
Right, Mick Murphy. Surely it's time for Junior Witter v Ricky Hatton for British title.
No, surely it's not. You know, I think there was a really small window where that fight could have happened. Yeah. When Witter had the WBC title before he lost to Bradley, and Hatton had a belt, and I think that was the perfect time for a unification fight. Bad blood, all the history. Now, I mean, Witter's got Frankie Gavin as an assignment. Ricky's obviously got his own stuff to do with his comeback. You know, I've never been a fan of that from a style point. You know, I've never been a fan of that match from a stylistic point of view. So, you know, it's one of those that's, you know, like the 10-year itch, isn't it?
Yeah,
you know, you can say it's done, but I don't think it would prove anything now the way it would have done if they were both in their primes. So, you know, why bother really? Why bother? Yeah. I think the interest in it has regressed to the extent where I don't think it's as marketable as it was.
No, I agree.
Okay. So from Stuart Law, will 2013 be the year of the super fight? Haye Vitali, Mayweather Pacquiao, Cotto Alvarez.
Well, let me get my crystal ball out again. I mean, I think there's certainly encouraging signs with the way this year is coming to a close with some of the fights that we've just had, a lot of the fights that we're looking forward to. I think to get a hat trick like that, Haye Vitali, Mayweather Pacquiao and Cotto Alvarez, is perhaps when you've been a fan of boxing, you've been involved in boxing for so long, you realise that it's quite unlikely that all those will happen. I think it's probably realistic that one or two will, but Mayweather Pacquiao, I'm tired of even having it in my mind, to be honest. Cotto Alvarez, I think, is a very, very marketable fight that could happen if if Cotto wins in December.
Yeah, 5th of May or something, yeah.
Yeah,
Massive.
yeah, I think that would be huge. Hey Vitaly, as I said before, yeah, it certainly could happen, but I don't know. I certainly think there's an upswing in the best fighting the best. There's certainly a possibility that 2013 could carry on where the end of 2012 left off.
Okay, right, just 2 more before we run out of time. If Ricky Burns moved to light welter, we're back with Ricky. If he moved to light welter and fought Amir Khan, who would win? And that's from one of our contributors on the website, Dewey Powell.
If Ricky Burns moved to light welter and fought Amir Khan, who would win? I would probably say Ricky Burns right now. If they were to fight, if it was Khan's comeback fight and it was the next fight that was made, I would pick Ricky Burns to beat Amir Khan. My first instinct was Amir Khan, but on current form, Burns is looking so strong at lightweight. I don't think it's too much of a jump for him to imagine him at light welter. Khan's confidence has got to be all over the place. Whatever he's saying, it's got to be all over the place.
New trainer.
New trainer. Yeah, I'd pick Burns.
Okay, interesting. Okay, one more.
Okay, one more. Okay, Joseph Webb. Who do you think Kell Brook could beat at world level, and how far can he go?
I think Kell can go a long way. I think his problems are the 2 big guns at the weight. Obviously, despite coming off the loss of Pacquiao and Mayweather, and I think they're a bridge too far. But I'd give him a good chance with any of the others, really, including Tim Bradley.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's certainly, maybe not in the next fight, but in the next 12 to 18 months, or certainly the next 12 months, I think the time could be right for those guys. But who could he beat at world level? He can beat Sinchenko, the guy that Malignaggi beat. Mm-hmm. He could beat Malignaggi, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. No disrespect to Paulie, but the thing is, with Brook, I remember, even though I think he was dropped on the night I'm thinking of, he was boxed on the Joe Calzaghe, Peter Manfredo undercard, and the crowd was very sparse. But there was something about Brook that had a bit of an X factor about him, had a bit of star quality. Yeah. And I've noticed that on the undercards that he was on as he came through, and now he's sort of revelling in his role, and I think he's really going to grow into the role of being a star. Not saying a superstar where you're looking at top 5 or 10 pound for pound, but certainly a very good operator at world level who is a handful for the very best and who can beat, you know, world ranked opponents. You know, I think the Carson Jones fight was a good test for him. It was a real baptism of fire, and it's a good springboard from him, you know, so that he knows what he needs to bring to the table inside of him as well as physically, where I think he said there were some issues, you know, with nutrition and training beforehand. I think that should all help him take him to the next level. So I think he could beat Malignaggi. I think he could possibly beat Devin Alexander, which is a fight they've talked about. I think he could possibly beat Zab Judah. Although all of these are good fights, you know, yeah, I'd like to see all of these fights. And I'd like to see him in with Bradley, you know, after 2 or 3 more fights. I think Pacquiao, albeit a slip in Pacquiao, Mayweather would still have too much. But you know, factor those guys out of the equation. Obviously, Mayweather's got a belt at light middleweight too. So factor those guys out of the equation. I think Kell would give anyone a run for their money. Okay.
Cool. Okay, so that wraps it up then for BNTV this time. Hope you had your questions answered. There will be a chance to do it again in the future, and we'll catch you on BNTV next time. Thanks for watching. Get involved with all the best boxing banter at our forum, and that's forum.boxingnewsonline.net.